Have you ever looked at a shot that you edited a while ago, and now you look and say, I think I can do better than that? Today in the Lightroom Whisperer, that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to take a look at a shot that I did an original edit on 12 years ago. And now with not only my own abilities changing over that time, but Lightroom expanding its abilities, we're going to see by hitting reset what we can come up with. We got a lot to do today, so let's get right to it. Before we jump into it though, did you know that you and I could actually work live remotely one-on-one on Lightroom? Whether you're trying to troubleshoot an issue, learn the basics, establish a workflow, or go deeper into editing, a one-on-one might be just what you need. I'll pop a link down in the description below for more information. As for now, let's get back to today's lesson. I've been redoing my website entirely, and I'm going to start putting a lot more pictures into the galleries that I haven't over the years. One of the pictures that I really like, and I use in a lot of classes, kind of doesn't really suit my taste as much these days. It's a little too crispy for me, it's a little too saturated for me, and I've changed in both my editing abilities and my tastes, and also Lightroom's changed quite a bit too in that time. The masks have changed, the abilities to control things within the dynamic range of the file have changed. So I figured I'm going to take another stab at this one and then post it on my website eventually. This picture itself, you can see, is pretty bright, pretty saturated. It's a little overexposed here, and that was partially in the actual exposure of it. It's dynamic. There's a lot of sunlight coming in on this side, on the left. The right is all in shadow, and it's pretty intense sunlight. This is pretty close to noonday. We also have a ton of mist coming at me. These are pretty large waterfalls, and there's a lot of volume of water coming over these. These pose a pretty challenging shooting scenario. So to photograph this, I have a polarizer. That's reducing the glare on the water. Any kind of mist that you're seeing that would be accruing on the moss, that's taking the glare, the reflection off of there. It's allowing the color to permeate. Same thing with little rocks or things you might see within the shot. Now you can see the dynamic range of the shot is pretty wide. You've got a ton of light on one side, you've got a lot of dark on the other, and I still photograph like I did back in the days of slide film. I use graduated neutral density filters at the time of shooting to manage this light. So I have a filter that's really similar to the linear grad in Lightroom. It's a hard neutral density filter, and I have that running right down this shadow line right here. That's giving me a lot less light in that bright area entering the camera than it is in the shadow, but it still wasn't enough to balance everything, so I have a second one of those, and it's a little cockeyed. It's juxtaposed because if you look at the line of light and shadow in here, it's not exactly the same, and I had to balance that differently. So I took a two-stop soft, so it's more blended or feathered neutral density filter, graduated neutral density, and I overlaid that diagonally coming across, and that was giving me a lot less light now in that bright area, allowing it to balance more to that shadowed area, and it's blending combined with that really hard line, just like we would do with those linear grads. Now this is a little bit kind of crispy looking for my tastes. It's a little maybe oversaturated too, I think, in that aspect. So we're going to go ahead from this shot and we're going to change it to things that I currently like much more. If we look here, masks back in the day were really different. You only had a couple options. The first mask was one that I used in the very center point to bring down some of that light. The next, similarly, a brush, was used on the very hot spots of this to try to bring it down some more. And then the last one of these, third one, even softer to try to bring down those highest spots. Now if I go in and just hit reset on this shot, we're going to see exactly what it looked like back when I took this originally. There's my raw file. Now if we take a look at this shot, you can see that there's vignetting on the side, and that's actually because those filters I'm using are in a holder, and that holder is really deep at this point because it's holding 3 filters. I didn't mention the third one on the very front. I have a very light filter there, and it's not going to be used for the photograph. It's used to collect all that mist coming at me, so when I'm ready to shoot, I can pull it, photograph, and pop it back in, and hopefully accrue very little, if any, mist on the actual shooting filters I'm using. That's going to save me the need to go back and clean that over and over again and try to keep that optical end of my camera dry. Now when I'm shooting this though, I'm anticipating that vignette. I'm looking within the frame and how I'm going to crop it later on, and I'm making sure that my story is still contained within that post-cropped frame. So a little visualization on my end ahead of time will help us there. Now before I crop it though, I'm going to go down and I'm going to use a lens correction. This is a really wide angle lens. It was on a Nikon. It was an 18mm Zeiss, which is a pretty well corrected lens. But if we look at that difference here, it is straightening out the edges a bit. It's minimizing a little bit of kind of distortion that was within there. And we can see the little vignette and the edge clean up a little bit there. Now I've corrected for that lens. I'm going to go and I'm going to hit crop. And I'm going to keep it the original framing because I do want this to be that same 3:2. And we're going to bring it in now. I want those shadows up there. I'm making sure to kind of get rid of all of the vignette that was caused by that. I could go in with current day Lightroom with a remove tool and let it fill in those edges. Absolutely. This was shot though way before that technology was invented, so I'm going to still keep to my original thought because I had that framing kind of set in my mind over it. Let's pull up here, make sure we get all of our waterfalls. And I think that looks pretty good, but let's go ahead and hit return and see how that looks. I'm liking that, but it's feeling a little heavy on this side with the shadows, so I'm going to pull in a little bit from over there and give us a little bit more on the left. I like that. That's feeling pretty balanced. We're really not clipping a lot of the tree over here. It's a little bright in the corner, but don't worry, we can take care of that with some filters later on. So right off the bat, I'm going to go into my basics and see exactly how much of these highlights and how much of that overexposed area on that center waterfall here I can pull back. So let's just experiment and take our highlights and go all the way down. And there's actually detail in all of that water. It's amazing how much detail those raw files can capture, even though it doesn't look like it necessarily at the time. So I'm going to go ahead and bring that up to where it's still pretty bright, but not overexposed. And I can bring up my whites a little bit too if I need to for that in the long run. First though, let's bring up my exposure. And the white balance is looking a little yellow. I mean, this is pretty greenish yellow in this area. The sunlight was pretty nice and bright, but I'm going to adjust my color temperature to bring that down a bit. Now, I haven't touched vibrance, I haven't touched saturation, and they're pretty intense still at this point. So I might just even try bringing down that saturation a little bit. Now, being a raw file, it is stripping away any kind of like color that was put to this file at the time of shooting. So you don't have vivid or anything like that affecting that shot. Now, I'm watching some of the other bright spots as I bring up the whites. I'm going to kind of ignore that center waterfall because we know the details there. We can bring that back later on, but I'm looking at the entirety of the shot. These are my global adjustments over here, which means they're addressing the entire image. So I'm going to treat it that way as I edit this part. Let's look in the shadows and see what bringing up those a little versus bringing them down does. And same thing. I mean, I'm not really looking over in the detail on the side here. I'm looking more on the shadows on the right to see what it's doing over there. And as I look at my histogram, I'm just starting to get some blacks in there, but I'm wondering where they are. If I go up and I hold over that side, I can see, oh, actually it's the vignette still from that filter holder. Now, that's not really distracting from my shot at all, so honestly, I don't care about that. But I do want some blacks within the shadows. So I can either click on that and bring my blacks down until I start to see in those darker areas some of those blacks appear. Or the other way I can do that is, uncheck that. As you're holding down and adjusting that black slider, you also want to hold down on a Mac option. On a PC, it's Alt. And then everything as you adjust that slider that is black is going to highlight. It gets rid of the rest of the image though, so it's not distracted. So if there's only little areas getting caught, you can see that more clearly. Now let's go back in. I like the way that contrast is looking, and let's start playing a bit. Bringing up the clarity a little bit, and it's looking a little bright in some of those spots. Bring those whites back down. Now this has been global, we're just dealing with the entirety of it, and we can start going with masks and refining things a little bit more. So let's get a bit more clarity on there. I don't want it to look too crispy, but I do want it to have a little bit more bite within that kind of contrast area. I'm going to bring up my vibrance a bit because that doesn't really work the same way saturation does. The vibrance is kind of adjusting the balance of colors within the shot, and it's adjusting kind of warm tones against cool tones and how they're represented. So as I pull up this vibrance, it's giving different colors more even footing at the image itself, but obviously we can still be very heavy-handed with that. So let's get to, it looks fairly natural. I like that. It's starting to shape up a little bit. Those highlights are looking pretty intense though. We can take care of some of that. This shot is mostly green. Something a lot of people don't know about a camera though, the way it's made, it's called a Bayer sensor that's made in these B-A-Y-E-R, and it's got 2 green pixels for every red or blue pixel. The reason really is we're much more sensitive to green light in our eyes, and that gives us more ability to see things in like a lower light scenario and have more detail within there. So they've built that sensor around the way our eyes work. That though is also making the green in this really stand out too much against other tones. So I can go down to my color mixer in this case, and I can either use it the old way, which used to be known as HSL, hue, saturation, and luminance with these sliders, or I can go into point color, grab my little cursor here, and I can go into the different areas and choose things to affect. So let's say I want to go to these really bright greens. I can click right on that. It now shows me over here, here's that bright green range. If it's too yellow or too green, I can adjust the hue by going one way or the other by grabbing this little dot and then going left to adjust it to more yellow, or right to adjust it to more green. The saturation is up and down. So if I go down with it because it was too saturated, I can pull some of that yellowish green out, or I can increase it if I really wanted to. Now the bright to dark is known as luminance, and that's where this slider on the right works. This is going to increase how vivid or how bright that specific range is. That's really more or less what I want to affect here. A little less saturation. I don't really want to affect the hue too much though, because I want those little yellow highlights to still permeate and stand out against the green. But now as I go in and pull down my luminance, we can already see a little bit of a difference here. Making that a little less intense. Now we also have sliders down below, so if it's a little hard to manage up here, you can come down, hit the slider, and be able to take care of it there. I'm going to go back in though, grab my cursor again, and go to my greens, my darker greens, and same thing, it's down to the pixel. So I want to be very careful where I'm poking. This is a brighter green, that's a darker green, and those are going to be different readings depending on where I poke. So I'm going to hold now here, and we've got those dark greens, and similarly, maybe I want a little bit more or less saturation within that range. It's already way less intense. It's way less on the eye. It's pulling a lot of that kind of vibrance away. It's actually what I wasn't a huge fan of in the original shot. Now I can go back in if I want and kind of intensify little bits of that. I can maybe go back and refine. It's maybe not too dull in those yellows. I can pull those back up a little bit, and if I want to see a little before and after the eye in the upper left here, I can say show me just in this one adjustment what's happening. I think it's looking a lot better already. I want a little more hit though from those bright spots. We can bring out little individual parts later on with brush masks if we need to. Now it's already looking a lot better. Let's see here though. I want to bring out a little bit more of those highlights now. A bit more of those whites. And it's looking bright on that waterfall, but if we look over here in our highlights, we're not clipping. We haven't lost any detail over there yet. If anything, it's just on the edge of gray turning to white. And you can watch now, I just clicked my little triangle up here. As I start to move, I can see, now I'm overexposing. And this is where it becomes kind of difficult to see maybe where I'm overexposing. And that's where that holding down Option or Alt can come in. And it's just that bottom corner. All right. And I do need a little bit of brightness there, but I don't want to lose the detail. And I think that looks pretty good. So let's start playing with this in local adjustments now. We're going to go in with our masking tools. Right out of the box, I want to bring down that corner a little bit. And I think the easiest way to do that is just going to be a linear gradient, bring it in from the corner. We want it to feather into that slightly darker area here. And let's just see what happens if we pull the whites down. There we go. Already lost our overexposed area there. Right. A little less just so it doesn't draw the eye as much. There we go. Let's see what it looked like before and after that adjustment. Yeah, and now without the little red highlights, way better. My eye isn't being drawn to that corner anymore. All right, let's go in now and play a little bit. We want to go with a brush. And now we're going to start to shape this and draw the eye more through this. In the days of dark rooms, this would have been burning and dodging. This was you going in and with your hands either not allowing the light to hit certain areas, so other parts got more exposure, they went darker, or other areas got less light, so it stayed brighter. So we're going to go in now and with a low flow, that means I can kind of scrub over an area more to affect it if I want more in one specific spot or be lighter on another and have a little more nuance. And I'm going to feather it quite a bit. That means that I'm really giving a blending to the edge. Not 100% though. I'm going to bring this filter down. And let's go in and just play a little bit over here. Now I'm not actually putting anything down yet, but you can see my little pink overlay being laid down. I really want to hit the brighter spots here and see what we can pull back on these. See if we can pull some detail out of it, but not make it dull. Now by scrubbing more up here, it's got a heavier application at the top of the center waterfall, but now here I have a light application coming through. Let's see what happens when I start pulling the highlights back and the whites up. It's increasing contrast a little bit. It's giving me some more detail in those highlights, those areas like right here in that waterfall where it's starting to crest, but at the same time it's not losing that pop. We don't get a muddy look from that water just yet. Go into same kind of adjustment here. And I'm going to give some of these little white caps coming through that same little hit to draw your eye to them. Definitely heavier in this area than I am over in the bottom here. Now I'm going to play with those a little bit more later on, but I don't want them to be in the same mask, because if I go in now and I need to like readjust something in one area, that's going to affect all of them, and I don't necessarily want to ruin those highlights that I've pulled back and then go readjust. So let's go back to before I showed you that and add a new brush. This other brush I'm going to do very similarly, low flow, nicely feathered, and I'm just going to start layering in a little bit more of that bright coming through, but now in the shadow range. And now here we go to this waterfall on the right. I want this one to be able to carry, story-wise, a lot of the weight that we've got being pulled from the left also. That's what's keeping us engaged on that right side against that really shadowy backside. We've got these tendrils coming down here that we're going to do the same with. Very low flow, about 20% roughly. Only a tiny bit's being laid on there, and I can be heavier if I need to in certain spots. That's what I'm going to do here in those bright spots. Still looking a little hypersaturated for me. I'm going to pull down that saturation a bit. And the next thing we're going to go in with is another mask, but we're going to play with what's known as a luminance range mask. Luminance range masks are going to allow you to choose a certain brightness range, and in this case I'm going right back to our waterfall here. And you can see it's now on the brightest spots covering those areas. This side is a filter that is going to be the specific actual filter, and this is the blending area for that. I have a whole nother section, 2 mask videos actually. I'll pop it down in the description below if you want a little more insight into the masking end of Lightroom. But in this case, I'm going to pull back that blending so it's just covering the brightest spots. Pulling back that filter a lot so it's only hitting the bright spots. And I'm going to pull back those highlights a little more, just in those really intense spots. Pop the whites just a little bit. We don't want to get muddy. It's looking much better already. Let's go down and just play a little bit with the overall shot. I'm liking this quite a bit, but I want to give these guys a little bit more of presence within the image. So let's add another brush. We're going to go in now with smaller size. Now go a little larger. And mainly exposure and shadow we're going to pull up a little bit here. We're just going to start painting it into the top. Now the very top up here where I'm bringing back some of this had one of those grad filters covering it. You can really see how it's visible here. Up here it's very dark. I had to cover some of that to get this balance across the sun coming through the frame. So now I'm just seeing if I can pull much of that detail back without it looking weird. And some of it is coming back pretty nicely. Some of it, though, is just going to be clipped in the kind of shadow realm just because of that dark shot. I don't want this to look unnatural, though, so I'm trying to keep it subtle. I do want that subtle vignette coming through. Let's go through the leaves a little here, give them a little bright. Yeah, just like before, we can do the before and after. And that achieves my goal. I don't want it to look unnatural. I want it to have that kind of draw all the way through, but I don't want it to be distracting within the image. I just want it to be kind of a secondary player, not framing. That looks pretty good. I think I'm happy with that. Let's go back and play with our color a bit more. I'm liking the balance of the yellows that we've got coming through in that foliage, but when you're more blue, I like those blues in the water more. So I'm going to go through, adjust to the yellows that I like in certain areas of the foliage. We're getting to about 5,000 Kelvin, which is roughly daylight balance. Anything between about 5,000 to 5,500 is considered daylight. We bring some magenta into this to counteract that harsh green. Oh yeah, that was what we were missing. Yeah, just that one adjustment alone was huge. Now you can see the edit I did before, we're crushing a lot more of those shadows. We don't have as much interest and intrigue in a lot of that side. That does help direct the eye a bit more down here. I do like, though, the ability to pull a lot more of this out. I might go in, though, and darken a bit of this with a heavy vignette just to create that draw. We can't really use a normal vignette because I don't want it to be just that central hub that we always get, though, from a vignette. So let's go in with a radial gradient. We're coming from the center because we do want this to give that vignette and we want to still draw the eye there. We're going to very heavily feather. We're going to invert And let's draw it out a little more here. Come out to our edge of our frame where we want. Since this isn't a vignette, this is a filter, we can go through and pull with the subtract if we want little bits out to draw them back in from that vignette. Now I'm going to just pull down our exposure slightly. By doing that, it's going to allow me actually to look at this and go, you know, this could use a little more punch in that center point now. The eye's always drawn to the brightest part of an image, so by doing so and creating that glow in that center, it's going to make that viewer subconsciously stay within the center of your frame. I've done other things in here to try to create that circular shot within the actual composition. The draw of the trees, the drop of the water over here versus over here, and everything in the edges. But now that's giving me just that little bit to come through. Now I'm going to go into that filter and do a subtract with a brush, and now pull from certain areas to just allow those highlights to come back through. Just like before though, my flow is set fairly low. That's allowing me to really control how much of that's coming back and where. I really just want the water to be permeating here. That's really the effect I'm trying to get back. Even those little guys make a big difference in where your eye goes. That looks pretty good. Okay, and I'm going to go in one more brush here and start to play with the water down below. So let's bring this also up a little in exposure, a little bit in highlights, a little in whites, and I want to go and I want to make this a little bit bluer to have a contrast against everything else. This is incredibly blue water actually in this area. It's all glacial melt that you get or runoff from the snow, so you actually get these really beautiful colors when you're down in the shadowy areas. A little too much blue. Actually, let's just see what happens if we punch the saturation there a bit. Same kind of thing. You really don't want the viewer to know that you've done this. It's not something that we would be like, hey, but that little bit's keeping me now more engaged in that actual creek coming out. I like that. I think it's looking pretty good, but let's just go back and take a look and see how it looks against the other one. I'm just going to go over, select that, go to my compare view, and yeah, it looks a lot more natural. Nowhere near as crispy, the saturation isn't as punchy, the color balance looks more natural. And if you look at the center waterfall, the cascade at the top of it over here actually has detail now. The middle of it also, where it was just a washed out mess before. The shadows themselves have more detail, but they're not distracting from the actual shot. They're still kind of allowing me to wrap in this circular motion, keeping me engaged within the waterfall system itself. I like it. I think this is one that definitely is now worthy of posting to the website. So I think the only thing left to do is export this. Maybe you've got some shots like this that you edited before, and now that your capabilities have grown, or just Lightroom's capabilities, you want to take another stab at them. It definitely can be worth it. From the Lightroom Whisperer, keep on Lightrooming.